May in the UK, a month of early morning, long shadows, and birdsong that doesn't let up. When migrants return from thousands of miles away, when courtship turns to nesting, and the next generation of wildlife begins to hatch. This month, I walked in the woods and reedbeds, from bluebell scouting in Groveley Woods, to the reed warblers of Avon Valley, to the Sika deer of Arne. Some of it was quiet, some of it was spectacular, all of it was wild. This is May. We started this month at the Greater Worshford end of Groveley Wood. Not the most productive of days in regards to sightings, but I did manage to scout a promising location for next year's bluebell season. I've been working on a particular idea for a Pacific shot, and the light through the trees gave me a great sense of how it might play out. The same weekend, on the Sunday, I headed down to Avon Valley. The reed beds were alive, calls of spring, reed warblers and sedge warblers flying between the stems, hidden but busy. Overhead, one of the peregrines from Salisbury Cathedral swept across the valley, searching for prey. Then, a rare sight. I caught swifts, not just in flight, but also mating in mid-air, on the wing, as it's known. An incredible moment. Swifts returned to the UK in early to mid-May, their piercing screams marking summer's arrival. They travel from Central and Southern Africa to breed, relying on old buildings, roof spaces and nest boxes. Sadly, they're now in decline. One of the small fixes is installing swift bricks, ideally during the build of a new home, though they can also be retrofitted too. From the valley, we crossed the path and we ran into a long-tailed tit, looking for a nearby nesting site. These tiny birds are filled with energy, insects and spiders being on the menu this time of year, and May is their peak breeding season. One pair will raise about a dozen chicks. Further along the river, we found a family of grey wagtails feeding over the water, likely an early brood. Their young already learning to forage. These birds start nesting around March or April, and given the timing, the adults may also try a second brood before the summer is out. Later that day, we checked at Salisbury Cathedral. The peregrine pair was busy, as most of their eggs had hatched. The chicks were beginning to molt and shred their fluffy white feathers in favour of grey juvenile feathers. We watched as the male gathered food, prepared it, before calling to the female, where they performed an aerial food pass. She then carried this meal to the south side of the spire, where the nest is, and carefully teared it apart to feed the chicks. Returning the next morning, the female was already guarding the nest site. Meanwhile, the male was repeatedly flying to try and gain height, before disappearing to go look for food, a sign that the female is still needed at the nest to keep the chicks warm. After that, we headed up to the River Park project, where a good number of house martins were feeding and zigzagging around the sky. They recently returned from Africa, but the dry May weather has meant mud is scarce, a problem for repairing and nest building. Without the rain, there is of course no mud, but without mud, there potentially could be no nests. Back in the reeds, I was able to spot and film a reed warbler. Like sedge warblers, they return from the tropics of Africa each spring to breed in the UK wetlands. These nests are carefully woven between reed stems, a deep cup of grass and spider's silk. They usually lay 3 to 5 eggs per brood, and they often have 2 to 3 broods per season, depending on weather and luck. Luck being a key factor. Reed warblers are one of the prime hosts to cuckoos. A cuckoo invades by laying an egg in another's nest, and when the cuckoo chick hatches, it pushes out the warbler's eggs and chicks. Nature is brutal, but it's all part of the story. As we continued through Avon Valley, we spotted some reed buntings and a common kestrel hovering overhead. The kestrel's head was perfectly still as it scanned the fields below. These birds can spot a vole from 50 metres away, a true master of motionless flight. We wrapped that day by watching sedge warblers chase each other through the reeds, likely defending their territory. The quieter footpaths meant that more wildlife was visible, and it felt like we had the valley to ourselves. The next visit came to Langford Lakes. After a long editing day following a trade show, we arrived early, around 7 AM, where I spotted a line of cygnets following their mother back to their reeds. The stillness of the lake was only broken by a call of a robin as a perfect start to the day. Langford Lakes is a 32-hectare reserve managed by Wiltshire Wildlife Trust and was once a gravel quarry. Its flooded pits now a haven for over 150 bird species, restoring efforts to turn it into a complex set of lakes, ponds and wet meadows. At the top lake I spotted a ringed plover acting very defensively over an island. These birds nest on gravel, laying their eggs in small scrapes that are nearly invisible. What I saw was the bird sitting and waggling. This is likely her curating the nest bowl. She also chased off a lapwing and a pied wagtail. Small but feisty. Sadly, I think the greater crested grebe nest that I've been monitoring throughout April has been abandoned, or the young have now been hidden, as I haven't seen the male, which is often a sign that things didn't quite go to plan. But it is possible that the female has moved the chicks somewhere safer. We'll know more in June. As I headed towards the cafe, I spotted a long-tailed tit having a wash. You can often tell the juveniles by the reddish tone around their eye, and it wasn't really that bothered by my presence, still learning the ways of the world. With the weather warming up, dragonflies and damselflies have also begun emerging. Whenever I try and capture these beautiful animals, I always try to get wide and detailed shots of them to not only show the insect but the environment too. That day brought specifically 2 exciting sightings, a first for me, a hobby, a small falcon in the Peregrine family, newly returned for the summer. They feed mostly on insects such as dragonflies, but they have been known to take swifts and martins mid-flight. The second of which was a cuckoo, a spring visitor known for its unmistakable cuckoo call. Its parasite breeding strategy. I was lucky enough to witness a courtship dance, although this male wasn't successful. The female flew off a few minutes later. Next stop was Martindown Nature Reserve, where we heard another cuckoo and a few distant birds of prey. On the rolling grasslands was alive with skylark song and new lambs with their mothers. We travelled down to Weymouth to visit RSPB Radipole Lakes and Lodmore. At Radipole, sedge warblers were still active, but the star of the show were the resident pair of marsh harriers. These are the largest of the UK harriers and were once nearly extinct. Their slow and low flight over reeds is unmistakable. They feed on everything from ducklings to frogs and consider their nest deep within reed beds, large platforms of reeds where the female takes mostly incubation duties. That morning we also saw a set of sand martins drinking from the lake. The smallest of the UK swallows, quick but agile, often the first to return each spring. At Lodmore we retreated to some new sightings, including an oyster catcher, easily identified by its black and white body and long orange bill. However, they don't often eat oysters. Their diet depends on whether they are inland or coastal. Their nests are shallow scrapes in gravel, and their camouflage chicks can leave the nest within one day. Near the far end of the reserve, I finally saw my first common tern. Elegant and buoyant in flight. These sea sparrows plunge into the water, catching fish and sea eels. When we returned to Radipole, we found some house sparrows dust bathing. They do this to keep their feathers clean and remove parasites, chasing dust through their plumage, loosening the dirt and the oil. Nearby, a sand martin nest was active and a number of hobbies were flying over the reserve looking for food. Our final trip in May was to RSPB Arne, on the east side of Poole Harbour, from the Heathlands Trail to the Shipstone Trail. The reserve offers beautiful views of Corfe Castle and of course the distant Poole Harbour. We had hoped to see Dartford Warblers, though some recent fires had pushed them to the other side of the reserve. We were still lucky enough to find a large number of stonechats and meadow pipits. Stonechats get their name from their chat chat call, like stones being tapped. We saw a likely breeding pair and the male flicking his tail. Meadow pipits, meanwhile, bounce along the ground, occasionally landing into song flight. These nests are often raided by cuckoos, unfortunately. They are mostly widespread birds on uplands and open lowland areas. After lunch, we watched some sparrows who were nesting near the cafe gracefully fly, a symbol of summer. Their journey from South Africa, crossing deserts and seas to return to the same nesting sites year after year. Later on the Shipton Trail, we came across a missel thrush who was surprisingly calm around the walkers who were nearby. On our way back, heading down towards the heathland, we saw 2 Sika deer browsing and consuming some gorse. Arne is one of the best places to see them. Their coats change depending on the season. Reddish spots in the summer, grey and brown in winter. As the day ended, I finally got to see a Dartford warbler darting through the lower bushes. A perfect end to a month of movement, migrants, quiet, brilliant movement. Thank you for joining me on this May journey, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss next month's wildlife adventure. But until then, stay cautious and keep looking.